What's up, Power Kids? Hey, it's Mr. Dwayne here. First of all, I just want to make sure you guys know that we miss being able to see you guys throughout the weekends. I know it's been a challenging time for some of you guys and maybe a fun time for some of you guys. But thank you for following up with the lessons as we go. All month long, as you can remember, we've been talking about this idea of forgiveness and what does that look like in our life. What does that look like in the life of the people that we need to forgive? How are we to forgive them? But most importantly, how does Jesus forgive us? And how should that look like in our life with other people? So if you have not got to check out the story today, I encourage you to do that. It's honestly one of my favorite stories. And this is a story that we can find in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 32, and this is going to be the story of the lost son. This is the parable of the lost son. Some of you guys may know it, some of you guys may not. And again, go ahead and check out that video if you have not yet. But what we see in this story is we have a family, two sons and a dad, and the younger son pretty much says that, I don't want to be here anymore. Just give me all of my inheritance, all of my money. And what he did was, the dad gave him his inheritance. The dad gave him his money, and he went off. He went off to a different country, and he spent all the money. He spent every last drop of it on whatever he wanted to do with it. He spent it probably on gallons and gallons of chocolate milk. He spent it probably on a lot of Chick-fil-A, but just not smart things in this time. Then what happened was, where he was at wound up in a famine. So that means that there was no food, and he didn't have any money or any food, so he had to work. So he went out for a job, and what the job that he did was to be a servant for someone to feed their pigs food. And he kind of came to this point where he was at this point when he was feeding the pigs, where he was like, I actually don't have to do this anymore. I can go back to my dad's place. Although he probably won't accept me as a son, he will have to accept me as a servant, and I can work that way, and at least I'll have food, right? He understood that his dad probably wouldn't accept him, but he's saying that at least there I can have food. So he puts everything down, and he goes. On the way there, he's practicing like what he'll say to his dad, because again, this was a pretty disrespectful thing for him to do. And he knew that there was probably not a high chance of his dad actually accepting him back as a son. But what we see here in Luke chapters 15, and you can, I encourage you to read along with it. It's not very long. But what we see here is the father's response. So if you look at verses 20, it says, so he, meaning the son, got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long ways away, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. So his father didn't respond in angerness or bitterness, or he didn't spite him. He was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And guys, this story that Jesus is telling it was a parable. So what that means is Jesus was trying to get another point across in this story. But what he was trying to tell us was just how God interacts with us in the moments that we need to be forgiven, right? No one in the planet Earth doesn't need to be forgiven. Everyone needs to be forgiven, right? So you need to be forgiven. I need to be forgiven. We all do. But what God is saying is that he meets us just like with the father, just like the father in this parable. He meets us with open arms, with compassion, ready to forgive us, ready to love us, ready to accept us, right? If you keep reading, you'll see that the father in this story threw a party for his son's return. And the son was just expecting to be back as a servant. So my questions and my challenge for us today is, one, how are you remembering how God forgives you? Like I said in my other video, it's easy to forget the fact that we've been so deeply forgiven. All of us get mean sometimes. All of us pick on our brothers and sisters. All of us don't obey our parents. All of us don't treat that person right at school. At some point in time, we all do sin at some point in time. But in that, God always meets us with love and forgiveness. And if you made the decision to say yes to Jesus, know that he's always ready to forgive you. And if you have made the decision to say yes to Jesus, know that he's ready to make that next step for you, right? Because he died on the cross for our sins, and therefore we're actually able to have a relationship with God. So that's my first question, is how are you remembering God's love? And the next one is, how are you displaying that? It would kind of be selfish for us to not reap or sow that same forgiveness. It would kind of be selfish for us to not forgive others just as we've been forgiven, right? And that's what we're talking about all month long. So stay tuned, stay connected, and we will see you guys in our next videos, okay? Bye, Power Kids.